I wrote and read this as part of the live lit and true tales event at the Nestival, the Nest in Columbus. The prompt was To the Beat. When I was little, we would drive from Wadsworth to Columbus where my grandparents lived and stay a night or two. I must have been anxious sleeping in a strange bed because I would hear my heartbeat, which I visualized as a monster perpetually stomping up and down I-71 trying to get me and my grandparents, but never quite arriving in time and then turning around when our car passed it on the road to try and get me at home. I retroactively named it Heartbeat Monster, but at the time I'm not sure I connected its trudging steps with my beating heart. Heartbeat Monster took I-71 because we took I-71, when really it should have walked the side roads to be compliant with the law. I was scared of Heartbeat Monster only at my grandparents' house when falling asleep, but not as horror-stricken as I should have been, maybe because I understood Heartbeat Monster was a vital part of me. We hadn't been to my grandparents in a while, and one trip we passed Heartbeat Monster a few houses up on our block. I waved. It raised its hairy arms out of frustration. That was a rare time Heartbeat Monster was anything other than content, chasing me back and forth nonstop through my childhood. Camus said, "Imagine Sisyphus happy." I hadn't read any Camus at 8, but I always imagined my Sisyphean childhood imaginary friend/monster perpetually chasing me down, wanting probably to give me a hug, as happy. On Thursday, May 5th, 2022, shortly before 7 p.m., my heart stopped beating. I had just driven from Ravenna to Cleveland, an hour's drive 75 miles an hour down the highway, parked and walked up a steep hill, feeling fine, arrived at our event and went to the bathroom. Some people who go into sudden cardiac arrest lose whole days prior to the event when they regain consciousness, but I remember going into that bathroom. I don't remember coming out, but thankfully I did before my heart stopped beating and I collapsed, in that order. Medical experts can often recognize the distinct fall as a collapse from heart stoppage. Damar Hamlin of the Bills experienced this collapse on live TV. I have no memory of mine. I'm not sure anyone saw mine, although I was quickly noticed lying on the floor. I appeared asleep, even snoring, but a nurse in the room recognized that sound of snoring as agonal breathing, the brainstem's last effort to get oxygen. But if the heart isn't beating, it doesn't help much to breathe. My first fully conscious moment was Sunday morning. I woke up to a cardiac ICU nurse saying, "You're a miracle." And I was like, "Remind me why." When she answered, it sounded familiar. I had been intermittently vaguely aware throughout, but when a nurse in the cardiac ICU calls you a miracle, you understand how lucky you are to be alive. I learned the survival rate of someone who goes into sudden cardiac arrest outside of a hospital is less than 10%. I was even more fortunate because I felt fully recovered. The cardiac ICU doctor explained hearts run on an electrical system, and my waves crossed in just such a way that my heart went into a fatal rhythm, stopped beating. It was still turned on electrically, just sort of twitching uselessly. A heart MRI revealed a congenital valve issue that had caused scarring, and it was the scarring that somehow led to the electrical waves crossing in that fluke way that caused the fatal rhythm. I was scheduled to get an ICD implanted, which would deliver the life-saving shock with those electrical waves to cross again. I asked her if that could happen again before the procedure to get the ICD in. She said, "Yeah, but you're hooked up to monitors, so we'll know right away and come in and restart you," which she described as casually as rebooting a frozen computer. I was horrified and comforted at the same time. The trauma response started soon after I got home. I thought about the randomness that had happened when I was with a nurse and a med student and near a hospital. I thought of how my partner was out of town the night before and I was home alone. When I returned to work, I felt uncomfortable going to the bathroom because if that had happened while I was locked in the bathroom, no one would have gotten to me in time. The encroaching, intrusive thought became pervasive. I'm not supposed to still be here. I still felt the gratitude of still being alive, but now it felt coupled with this trauma response. We went to a cookout for an acting group Sharon is in. I knew no one there. I remember sitting on a bench watching all these people enjoy a cookout and thinking, wow, none of these people know. I'm not supposed to still be here. I got home that night, went to sleep, and woke up in the middle of the night in a panic. I'm not supposed to still be here. I decided after that night to talk more about what happened. I told the story. I hope I didn't make anyone uncomfortable telling my story. In my online support group for SCA rescuees, we're all there to encourage each other and support new members who just went through the experience. But we also celebrate still being alive. We celebrate our rebirthdays. Mine is May 5th. And we tell each other our rescue stories. They were stories first told to us because we don't remember. When I signed up for this reading, not knowing what the prompt would be, I told myself to just let the prompt inspire me. The story of my sudden cardiac arrest is probably one of the more unique experiences I've had, but I didn't want to force tell it. Then the prompt came To the Beat, and I was like, well, now I'd be forced not telling it. They say good CPR breaks ribs because it requires an enormous amount of pressure to push the heart through its protective bone structures enough to circulate a person's blood. It's actually kind of amazing CPR even works. Great CPR saves a life without breaking ribs, and I had great CPR from two people, the nurse and a medical student, who arrived after the nurse had already started CPR, so they were able to trade off. Meanwhile, someone had called 911, which is critical, obviously, but in a time-sensitive situation like that, it's important someone quickly makes that call. The 911 operator knew from the description I needed an AED as soon as possible, so she sent someone from the group across the street to a restaurant where an AED was supposed to be on site. No AED, but by coincidence, an electrocardiologist was having dinner. There are two facets to heart function, the electrical and the plumbing, and two kinds of cardiologists specializing in the two issues. I would have been lucky a doctor was in the restaurant across the street. For there to be a cardiologist, and specifically an electrocardiologist, makes me think of that Gary Larson cartoon where a guy is on stage next to a fishbowl and the fish has fallen out, and in the audience are three people. One says, "Why, yes, I'm an ichthyologist." Another says, "Yeah, me too." And a third says, "So am I," which taught me when I was 10 that an ichthyologist is a fish doctor. I don't know that he was needed, but I sure appreciate his interrupting his dinner to come over and supervise. I was told EMT arrived 10 minutes later. I'm not sure anyone's sense of time was great right then, but they came in with the defibrillator, the only thing that would save my life. They shocked me, but it didn't work. Defibrillators don't actually restart hearts. They stop hearts in a fatal rhythm, and the heart restarts itself. Mine restarted still in the fatal rhythm. I always thought from TV shows and movies, defibrillators had to ready themselves between shocks, like the first shock took so much out of them they needed a breather. But no, those things can fire off one shock after another for many dozens of shocks. The reason they don't shock people repeatedly is because not knowing which shock will work, they have to maintain CPR in between. So they alternate shocks and 2 minutes of CPR. They shocked me again and it still didn't work. By now they were ready to transport me to the hospital, so they put me in the ambulance. As my friend said when I told him the story, "That's wild. Your dead body got loaded into an ambulance," which is technically true. I had no pulse, which means I was clinically dead, but my brain was still very much alive and getting oxygen from the CPR. They shocked me a third time in the ambulance and my heart restarted in a functioning rhythm. I really wish the second time it worked, mostly because Sharon followed me to the hospital after the nurse explained to her that the first two shocks didn't work. So it was a long delay before she got word I'd be okay, that I was alive. I had a brief window of a memory of throwing up in the ER before I got moved to the cardiac ICU, which would have been that Thursday night. Then the next 2 days I don't remember at all. I kept asking the same questions. I'm dating myself, but if anyone remembers Tom Hanks on Saturday Night Live's Mr. Short-Term Memory, I was exactly like that. I kept asking if I died, which I don't know why I kept asking. If I died, I wouldn't have been asking. I had flatlined. I was clinically dead when I had no pulse, but those are just medical technicalities. No one has ever died and then lived. I kept mentioning the bathroom, how I remember going in. I was awake all Thursday night into Friday morning, and for context, I work early and I'm rarely up past 9, even if I'm off the next day. They didn't want to give me anything to help me sleep, though I asked repeatedly since I didn't remember already asking. My phone lost power and the hospital didn't have the right cord for it. I asked my poor nurse if she could charge it so many times. When Sharon came again the next morning, the nurse asked if she brought my phone cord, and when Sharon said yeah, the nurse said, "Oh, thank God." So Heartbeat Monster really was chasing me through my life, but as an undiagnosed congenital heart valve issue that was essentially asymptomatic. I didn't have high blood pressure. Even an ECG, which I've had, wouldn't have revealed the problem. It could have caught up to me at any time. I could have been alone. I could have been locked in the bathroom. By sheer randomness, I was in a room with people who knew just what to do, who rescued me. I'm in that fortunate 9%. I spent a lot of time agonizing over that 91%, who experienced the same event and didn't have the same great luck. But I can recognize them and still be glad I'm here. I can be an advocate for life-saving CPR and AED availability. I can start to fall asleep on my side and get that insomnia-inducing panic when I feel my heartbeat and think I exist to that beat. And that is my To The Beat reading. Thank you for checking out on my YouTube channel.